Morning sunlight drifted over the quiet neighborhood of Maplewood, a small Tennessee town where people tended their gardens and waved to neighbors out of habit. It was the kind of place where life moved slowly enough for families to breathe, and for a single father like Marcus Turner, that mattered more than anything. He woke before dawn with a sense of purpose he had not felt in a long time. Today was his son's birthday, and he wanted the day to feel magical from the moment the sun rose to the moment the candles went out. Marcus moved around the little house with quiet excitement, fixing decorations, setting up a small table outside, and checking the chocolate cake that had drained his savings more than he cared to admit. He had saved for months just to give 7-year-old Caleb something special. He hung blue streamers along the porch railings and tied balloons to the mailbox, smiling every time he imagined the look on his son's face. This was the part of fatherhood he cherished, the chance to give his boy a childhood far brighter than his own. The house soon filled with the smell of pancakes and syrup as Caleb, still in his rocket-printed pajamas, ran happily around the living room. His energy lifted the entire house like sunlight pouring into a dark room. He kept asking if his friends were coming, if the games were ready, if Uncle Ray would bring the foam rocket launcher. Marcus answered each question with the same warm patience, knowing how deeply the boy had been counting down the days. Families began to arrive by late morning. Cars lined the street, children ran up the driveway carrying bright gift bags, and parents greeted each other with easy smiles. For a while, the Turner home felt like the happiest place in town. Music played softly from a small speaker. Kids took turns jumping off the porch step, pretending they were superheroes flying through the sky. Laughter rolled across the lawn in waves, creating a sense of joy so pure that Marcus had to step back once just to take it in. This moment, this perfect, ordinary happiness, felt like a blessing he had waited years to experience. But joy can be fragile, and sometimes it breaks without warning. Marcus was in the kitchen refilling lemonade when he heard the unmistakable sound of car doors shutting outside. He looked through the window, expecting to see more parents arriving. Instead, he saw something that made his breath stall in his chest. 3 police cruisers had pulled up in front of his home. They were not rushing with lights or sirens, but their presence felt heavy, out of place, and wrong. He stepped outside slowly, confusion washing over him. The officers began to spread out as if responding to a serious incident. One of them called out that they had received a report of an illegal gathering and possible disturbance connected to this address. Marcus tried to explain that it was only a children's birthday party, but the words went unheard. The officers moved past him, scanning the yard, questioning parents, asking people to step aside. The entire atmosphere changed within seconds. The music was abruptly unplugged, leaving an uncomfortable silence hanging in the air. Kids clung to their parents, frightened by the sudden shift from celebration to tension. One of the officers brushed past a table without care, knocking it hard enough that the birthday cake slid forward. The frosting smeared, the blue number 7 tipped over, and the cake that Caleb had been so excited about became a symbol of everything falling apart. Tears filled the little boy's eyes as he watched his perfect cake collapse. He did not understand any of it. He only knew that his birthday, the day he had waited for all year, was suddenly turning into something painful. Parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. One by one, they made the decision to take their children home, whispering apologies that Marcus could barely hear. They were not angry at him, but they were scared of the situation forming in front of them. In less than 10 minutes, all the joy disappeared. The laughter, the games, the music, the excitement, everything faded into the quiet shock that now filled the yard. Streamers fluttered helplessly in the wind. Balloons swayed without purpose. The smell of grilled food mixed strangely with the cold air of disappointment. Caleb stood beside his father, his cheeks wet and his voice trembling as he asked the question Marcus hoped he would never hear. He wanted to know why the officers had taken his birthday away. Marcus held him close, feeling the weight of a pain he could not hide. He stayed calm for his son's sake, even though something deep inside him felt like it had cracked open. When the supervising officer finally returned, he coldly announced that the report had been a mistake. A false alarm. A wrong address. They were free to continue. But the party was long gone. The children were gone. The joy was gone. And the memory of this day would forever be marked by confusion and heartbreak. The officers walked away without apology, leaving behind a ruined cake, a silent yard, and a boy holding onto his father with shaking hands. Marcus felt helpless for the first time in years. He had worked so hard to build a peaceful life for his child. Yet even that could be interrupted in the blink of an eye. Ray stood beside him quietly, unable to find the right words. Everything felt still, as if the world had taken something precious and left nothing but emptiness in its place. Marcus's mind drifted to a single name, a person he had promised never to call unless it was truly important. Today felt like that moment. His hands trembled as he pulled out his phone. He stared at the screen for a long moment, trying to decide if he should cross the line between letting things go and standing up for what had been done to his son. But when he looked at Caleb's ruined birthday table, the decision became clear. He made the call. The line rang once, then twice, before a familiar voice answered with concern. It was someone with influence, someone whose help could change everything. Marcus spoke slowly, his voice low and heavy with emotion. He explained what had happened. He described the officers' behavior. He told them what the day was supposed to be. And the voice on the other end did not hesitate. They told him they were already on their way. It was the first moment all day when Marcus felt a spark of hope, even as he held his distraught son close. Something had been set in motion, something that would change not only his day but the fate of the officers who had ruined it. And part one ended with a quiet determination in his heart, the determination of a father who refused to let his child's innocence be treated carelessly ever again. The sun had climbed higher in the sky, but the warmth it gave no longer touched the Turner home. The yard still carried the remains of the birthday joy that had been torn away, deflated balloons drifting along the grass, torn streamers hanging loosely, and a half-destroyed cake sitting forgotten on a tilted table. Caleb stayed pressed against his father's side, quiet now, small fingers gripping the fabric of Marcus's shirt as if letting go would make everything collapse again. Marcus kept one protective arm around his son, even as his mind carried the weight of what he had set in motion with that one phone call. He didn't make calls like that lightly. He didn't like using connections or favors, especially when he worked so hard to build a peaceful, normal life. But what happened today had crossed a line he could not ignore. Caleb's innocence had been bruised, and Marcus could not let that be swept away by excuses or paperwork. The sound of tires rolling onto the street broke the silence. A black SUV pulled up in front of the house, followed by another. Neighbors peered from windows as the doors opened. The figure who stepped out of the first SUV brought an immediate shift to the atmosphere. It was Colonel Samuel Price, a retired Air Force officer who had once served as Marcus's commander. A man known for his discipline, fairness, and refusal to tolerate injustice in any form. The colonel approached with a steady stride, his presence firm without being intimidating. He took in the scene around him, the ruined decorations, the empty yard, the way the child clung to his father, and his expression softened with concern. Marcus felt a wave of emotion rise in his chest as the older man placed a hand on his shoulder. It had been years since they last spoke, but the bond formed during military service never truly disappeared. The colonel knelt down to Caleb's level. His voice carried the warmth of someone who understood how fragile a child's world could be. He greeted the boy gently, asking if he was all right. Caleb didn't answer. Instead, he leaned further into his father, overwhelmed and confused. The colonel rose slowly, giving Marcus a quiet nod that said everything without needing words. Behind the colonel, a second SUV door opened. This time, a woman in a dark suit stepped out. She introduced herself as an attorney from the Civil Rights Oversight Division, someone the colonel trusted deeply. Marcus knew then that this situation had already grown larger than he expected. His one phone call had reached the ears of people who were not just willing to listen, but prepared to act. The attorney moved around the yard, listening intently as Marcus recounted everything that happened. His voice stayed level, but the pain behind it was unmistakable. He explained how the officers ignored him, questioned parents aggressively, shut down the music, and disrupted everything without any effort to verify the report first. He described the moment the cake was knocked over and the way the children cried. He told them how Caleb asked why his birthday was taken away. As he spoke, Caleb stayed quietly against him, holding on to his father as if every word was a reminder of what he had lost. The colonel listened with his arms crossed, jaw tight. The attorney took notes and asked gentle questions, showing a deep empathy that seemed to settle some of the tension in the air. When Marcus finished, the attorney assured him that what happened here would not be brushed aside. She explained that officers were required to follow protocols, and from what she heard, several violations had occurred: neglecting to confirm the address, failure to communicate properly, unnecessary escalation, and lack of professionalism during a family event involving minors. The colonel took a slow breath before speaking. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't show anger. But the calm in his tone was more powerful than shouting. He told Marcus that this wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was a failure of responsibility. Something that could have traumatized children far more deeply than anyone realized. He promised to oversee the complaint personally, something most people in town never had access to. A few neighbors drifted over as the discussion continued. They wanted to express their support. Some apologized for staying inside, afraid to interfere earlier. Others said they would testify because they had seen the officers acting harshly from their windows. Marcus appreciated their kindness, though a part of him couldn't help feeling the sting of how quickly joy had turned to fear. For a moment, it felt like everything might start to resolve. But the day had another turn left. A police cruiser appeared again, though this time only one. Inside it was Officer Lane, the supervising officer who had announced the false report earlier. He stepped out with a stiff expression, clearly surprised to see unfamiliar vehicles and the colonel's stern figure. The colonel waited calmly as the officer approached. Marcus placed a reassuring hand on Caleb's back, sensing the child's anxiety increase. Officer Lane attempted a polite greeting, but the colonel's gaze stopped him cold. The attorney stepped forward, introducing herself and requesting that the officer answer a few questions regarding the earlier response. What followed was a tense exchange. The officer attempted to explain the situation as a simple mistake, insisting they were responding properly. But his explanations were thin, inconsistent, and missing details the neighbors had already described. He claimed he didn't see the cake being damaged. He claimed he didn't order the music unplugged. He insisted no one on his team acted unprofessionally. The colonel didn't need to raise suspicion. His silence alone seemed to strip the officer of confidence. The attorney pressed for clarity, asking why he didn't verify the call before dispersing the gathering, why he didn't apologize once the mistake was discovered, and why the presence of children didn't influence their approach. Officer Lane grew defensive. He shifted blame to the anonymous caller. He blamed the increasing crime rates in town. He even hinted that he thought the gathering might have been someone trying to cause trouble. Those words settled in the air with an uncomfortable weight. The colonel's eyes hardened. He finally spoke, his voice low but unyielding. He reminded the officer of the duty to protect the community, not intimidate it. He reminded him that assumptions and impatience could damage lives, especially the lives of innocent children. The officer's face shifted as he realized who he was speaking to. Colonel Price was a name that still commanded respect in the state. When the colonel declared that a full investigation would begin immediately, Officer Lane tried once more to defend himself. But the attorney had already recorded the conversation. Marcus said nothing, but the strength in his silence spoke volumes. The officer eventually returned to his cruiser, shaken in a way he had never expected. He drove away without another word, leaving an emptiness behind that almost felt peaceful. After he was gone, the colonel placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder again. He assured him that he had done the right thing, not only for Caleb but for every family in the community. He looked at the child's tear-stained face and said the most important part was making sure Caleb understood none of this was his fault. Neighbors offered to help clean up the yard. Some offered to bring their kids back later in the week to give Caleb a second chance to celebrate. The kindness touched Marcus deeply, reminding him that even when things break, people can still choose to lift each other up. As the afternoon softened into evening, the attorney left to file immediate complaints, and the colonel stayed behind a little longer, helping Marcus gather the fallen decorations scattered across the grass. It wasn't the birthday Marcus had imagined. It wasn't perfect or joyful or filled with laughter the way he planned. But something had changed, something powerful. The world had seen his son's pain, and people who mattered were stepping in. Caleb held Marcus's hand as they walked back inside. His voice was small when he asked if the officers would come back to take his birthday again. Marcus knelt, pulling him into a warm embrace. He promised him gently that no one was ever going to take anything from him again. And as night began to fall, Marcus felt a quiet strength rising inside him. He did not ask for this fight, but now that it had come to his doorstep, he would see it through. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Tomorrow would bring justice for a child who simply wanted to blow out 7 candles. Morning came quietly, slipping into the Turner home with a gentle glow that softened the pain of the day before. Marcus hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Caleb's face when the cake fell, heard the silence when the music stopped, felt the weight of the ruined celebration. But he had stayed strong through the night because his son needed him, and because the wheels of justice were already turning. Caleb slept curled against him on the couch, exhausted from the emotional storm. Marcus brushed a hand over his son's hair, wondering how something as simple as a birthday party had spiraled into such heartache. He wished he could shield the boy from every unfairness in the world, but he knew he couldn't. What he could do, however, was make sure that those who caused yesterday's pain were held accountable. Just after 9, a knock sounded at the door. Marcus opened it to find the attorney from the Civil Rights Oversight Division standing beside Colonel Price. Their expressions were serious, but not cold. They told him that they had documents for him to review, and that the full investigation had already begun overnight. Complaints had been filed, video evidence collected from neighbors' phones, and statements cross-checked. The attorney explained quietly that the officers responsible had already been placed on administrative leave while the internal affairs process moved forward. She wanted Marcus to know that none of this was normal procedure for a mistaken report, and that the lack of professionalism displayed during a children's gathering violated several policies. She reminded him that his courage to speak up prevented this from happening to someone else. But something else happened too, something Marcus had not expected. News of the incident had reached the local mayor's office before sunrise. A neighbor who witnessed everything, a grandmother who lived across the street, had sent an email detailing what she saw, and her message struck a nerve in city leadership. By the time the attorney and colonel arrived, several city officials had already requested updates. The mayor himself wanted to speak with Marcus. When his phone rang 30 minutes later, Marcus hesitated before answering. The voice on the other end was calm, apologetic, and deeply troubled by what had occurred. The mayor explained that the city prided itself on protecting families, and that what happened at Caleb's birthday party was unacceptable. He asked if Marcus would be willing to come to City Hall later in the week to discuss improvements to the town's response system. Marcus agreed, not for recognition, but because he wanted the town to be safer for his son and every other child. After the call ended, Caleb walked sleepily into the room, clutching the small superhero cape he had worn at the start of the party. He looked up at his father with tired eyes and asked if they could still celebrate, just the two of them. The innocence of the question softened something inside Marcus. He told his son they could have any kind of celebration he wanted, balloons, cake, games, or simply time together. Caleb chose something beautifully simple. He wanted pancakes with extra syrup, a small candle stuck in the middle, and quiet music playing in the background. Marcus made everything just the way he asked. They sat at the kitchen table, father and son alone but safe, sharing a moment untouched by fear. When the single candle flickered, Caleb closed his eyes and made a wish. Marcus didn't need to ask what it was. He already knew. The day unfolded in small, peaceful pieces. They played board games, watched Caleb's favorite space movie, and took a long walk around the neighborhood. Several neighbors stopped them along the way, offering warm words and gentle support. Some of the children drew pictures for Caleb, simple little crayon drawings of balloons, stars, and smiling faces. The kindness wrapped around him like a soft blanket, restoring pieces of trust that had been shaken loose. A few days passed. Then the investigation reached its conclusion. Marcus received a call from the attorney, who spoke with a steady, respectful tone. She explained that Officer Lane and 2 of the responding officers had been found responsible for several procedural violations. Their failures were not small: lack of communication, unnecessary escalation, disregard for verifying the report, and improper behavior at a children's event. As a result, 2 had resigned amid disciplinary action, and 1 had been officially dismissed. The department issued a formal apology to Marcus and to the community. Training protocols were changed. Verification steps were tightened. The chief of police personally visited Marcus's home to apologize face-to-face, something that rarely happened but was necessary here. Marcus accepted the apology quietly, not out of weakness, but because he wanted his son to see what dignity looked like even in pain. After the meeting, the chief knelt down to speak to Caleb, expressing sincere regret that his birthday had been disrupted. He brought a small badge-shaped pin for the boy, telling him it symbolized people whose job was to protect, not frighten. Caleb accepted it slowly, unsure at first, but Marcus could see him trying to rebuild trust one small moment at a time. A week later, the mayor invited Marcus and Caleb to a community event at the local recreation center. There, in front of families, officials, and neighbors, the mayor spoke about the importance of accountability, understanding, and respect. He mentioned the Turner family, not by focusing on the pain they experienced, but by highlighting their strength, patience, and the courage it took to stand up when something was wrong. When the mayor invited Caleb to the front, the shy boy clung to his father's hand. But he walked forward, cape fluttering softly behind him, and the crowd gave a gentle round of applause. In that moment, Marcus saw his son's confidence returning, not because of attention, but because he knew he wasn't alone. The town was standing with him. That afternoon, something beautiful happened. The neighbors who had been at the first party organized a surprise gathering at the recreation center. There was a new cake, decorated with a big blue number 7. There were balloons, games, and music. Children ran toward Caleb with excitement, eager to give him the birthday he never got. For the first time since the incident, Marcus saw pure joy return to his son's face. He watched Caleb play, laugh, and chase his friends. He saw the cape flying behind him, saw him point to the sky like he was ready to blast off toward the stars. This time, no shadows fell across the celebration, only light, laughter, and the warmth of a community healing together. As the party drew to a close, Caleb climbed into his father's lap, tired but happy. Marcus wrapped his arms around him, grateful beyond words. He thought about everything that had happened, the ruined decorations, the fear, the phone call, the investigation, and now this moment of peace. Painful events had unfolded, but something meaningful had grown in their place: accountability, change, unity, and the reminder that a father's love can shift the world. When it was time to leave, Caleb looked up at his father with bright, steady eyes and whispered that this was the best birthday ever. Marcus felt tears fill his own eyes, not of sadness but of overwhelming relief. He kissed the top of his son's head and held him close. Driving home, he realized something powerful. Life would always bring challenges. There would be mistakes, misunderstandings, and moments that felt unfair. But there would also be courage. There would be people willing to do the right thing. There would be communities that choose love over fear. And there would always be a reason to hope. The story of that ruined birthday became something far bigger, a story of accountability, healing, and the importance of standing up when something is wrong. And Caleb, with his small but resilient heart, learned that even when a day falls apart, it can rise again in ways no one expects. Their lives moved forward. The fear faded. The love remained. And in the end, what stayed strongest was the bond between a father and his son, a bond no mistake, no policy, and no uniform could ever break.